That position is quite simply wrong. And I had the opportunity to meet with Russia's premier UFO skeptic, a scientist named Yuri Platov. He works at something called the Institute for Terrestrial Magnetism, part of their Academy of Sciences. Dr. Platov, who is a friend, or at least a colleague of Jim Oberg, by the way, informed us of the official history of UFO studies in Russia. He said their National Academy of Sciences, the premier scientific body in Russia, had began formal studies of UFOs back in the 1970s. That 10 different scientific institutions are involved, that thousands of case files have been compiled, along with photos and drawings. If we could roll the tape here, I'll show you a couple of those photos and drawings. And he says there is general agreement among Russian scientists that the topic is worthy of study. Platov describes himself, unlike Oberg, as a friendly skeptic. By that, he agrees that well over 90% of UFOs cataloged by the Academy are explainable. Again, I remind you of Jim Oberg's comments. The Russians can't distinguish truth from reality. This guy tells me that the Academy knows that 90% of the cases that have been cataloged by them are perfectly explainable. However, he says in order to identify a new phenomenon, you have to proceed with identifying that which is not new. He fully admits that many cases are not explainable, and he does not rule out the possibility of extraterrestrial visitations. Some of the photos that we were able to bring back are quite good. This is a drawing of one that he says is explainable as a missile test. One case in particular that's been reported previously here in the West was witnesses who saw a UFO land on this frozen lake and take off. They left behind this large circular formation that kind of cut into the ice, sort of a Russian version of a crop circle, you know, cold evidence, cold hard evidence. That case remains unexplained as far as Platov is concerned. He also mentioned that Russians have several of the traditional crop circle, crop-type formations around the country, but he had no files to give me on those. He was generous enough to turn over several dozen of his case files to us, including photographs. He sums up his attitude by saying that science should be interested in pursuing the unexplained, that the prospect for ET life is very important, but we must follow the evidence where it leads, not allow our research to be clouded by preconceived ideas, whether pro or con. That's the attitude of a true skeptic.
Сюда не хочешь подойти. Я к тебе обращаюсь. Или ты не слышишь, Дэн? Я тебе сказал. Выше порядок. Детер. Это детер.
Движений вверх-вниз идет по улице своих построек. Он только что встал, он обязан идти. Он прям как параллельный, как крепость стоит. Экспериментатор движений вверх-вниз смотрит в сторону выбранной цели. Он знает ответ, он предельно собран. Он прокладывает путь для других поколений. Экспериментатор, экспериментатор. Экспериментатор движений вверх-вниз формирует новые модели сознания, он идеально выбит подтянутый строк, он несет свой кирпич к алтарю мироздания. Экспериментатор движений вверх-вниз видит прозор там, где мне видна спина, он считает, что прав, он уверен в идее, он в каждом процессе достигает. Экспериментатор, экспериментатор, экспериментатор.
The next witness I want to talk about is Dr. Rem Varlamov. He's one of the founders of Russian ufology. He's currently teaching at the Moscow Institute of Technology. He's also the president of a ufologist union, very low-key group. Like Dr. Budakov, Dr. Varlamov agreed to talk to us only because we had skipped talking to all those other people, like Ajaja and Popovich. I have nothing against those folks, but they do get their names in the paper, and people like Varlamov and Budakov think they're just out to make some money. In fact, we didn't talk to them, allowed us to talk to him. Varlamov has specialized, go ahead and roll the tape, he specialized for nearly 30 years in the study of alleged UFO landing sites in Russia, including 10 that are in the direct vicinity of Moscow, and he's documented numerous impressive physical characteristics.
The main thrust of our work is not to contact the space intellect, but to understand how the universe works. We wanted to answer 3 questions. 1, do other worlds and dimensions exist? We have measured 22 physical constants to suggest the answer is yes. 2, do our laws of physics exist in those worlds? No, they don't, and the differences can be documented. 3, can we contact this other intelligence? The answer is yes, but we must be careful. We discovered many measurable characteristics within the landing sites. The plants inside these circles, or impressions, were greatly changed. Plants which were inside the circles contained 20 to 30% more phosphorus and carbon, and they grew at a slower rate. We studied 40 elements in the soil through spectrography. 20 of those elements were found in concentrations 20 to 60 times higher inside the circles than outside. Lead was found to be 14 times as concentrated. Titanium, 8.5 times. Cobalt, barium, and zinc, 3 to 4 times. We also documented physical and psychological effects. Inside the circle, heart rates and blood flow were 60% higher. Our testing equipment also was affected at times. We conducted an experiment to see if the measurement of time might be affected by the energy inside the landing sites. We used both mechanical and crystal timepieces, which were synchronized. then placed both inside and outside of the sites. What we found were that after 2 hours inside the landing sites, time speeded up. The timepieces were no longer synchronized.
Varlamov, though, Dr. Varlamov is not alone in his study of these UFO landing sites. He says he and other scientists say the effects that he claims to have measured can be detected even years after the alleged landings take place, so that you can go back and test it again and again and again. One of his most trusted colleagues, a man who is not known at all outside of Russia, is Dr. Yuri Simakov. I know it's kind of hard to keep all these names straight. It's hard for me, but this is the last one I think you'll have to deal with. Dr. Simakov is a government biologist employed at one of these long-winded titled government research institutes. He has recognized some really amazing phenomenon inside these alleged UFO landing sites. Dr. Simakov specializes in measuring single-cell organisms in the soil. What he's found at these landing sites is this: there are none. No bugs in the dirt where UFOs set down. 2 inches outside the landing site, the soil could be teeming with microscopic life. Inside the soil, the circle itself, nothing. Go ahead and roll this tape. The soil is simply barren, and by carefully sampling the soil at these sites, Simakov is able to determine the shape of whatever it was that sets down. He can see that at this point there's microscopic life, at this point there isn't, so he's able to come up with these patterns of what these things look like that set down. An even more intriguing discovery was made by Dr. Simakov at these 2 alleged landing sites, hundreds of miles apart and years removed from each other. What he found in the soil were these tiny, colorful balls of unknown origin. Neither Simakov nor any of his colleagues could figure out what they were. He says they contained all the necessary building blocks of life, that when placed in water they opened up like seed pods, and he joked that they might be some sort of cosmic sperm. Here's him discussing his findings.
The single-cell organisms simply leave the sites. They disappear. They don't die. It's as if they were forced to leave the sites. We also experimented with insects. Insects have different receptors than we do. I suspect insects can feel fields not known to us, or fields that are slightly varied. When we placed flies in a dish and put the dish over the landing site, the flies went wild, buzzing and flying around. The balls, I can't find any evidence of their existence in any printed material. They may be formed as a result of transmutation, when oxygen was transformed into sodium under the influence of the UFO, or maybe they are containers to carry life from one planet to another. Still, the objects are not known. One more thing, at the spots where I found the balls, the flies we used in our experiments not only went wild, but were killed. And mosquitoes could be found outside the landing site, but not inside.
Although Dr. Simakov didn't have much of this material, he gave us a sample of it in hopes that American scientists that we might contact might be able to figure out what it is. I'll tell you that smuggling cosmic sperm through Russian customs is a somewhat daunting task, but we managed to get half of the world's known supply of the stuff back to the United States for analysis. At the suggestion of Dr. Jack Kasher of the University of Nebraska, we sent some of this stuff to the University of Nebraska Plant Pathology Lab, because Dr. Simakov, as you heard there, had speculated it acts like seed pods. According to Dr. Ann Vitiver of that lab, an interdisciplinary team examined and tested the material. The bottom line is, they don't know what it is either. They guessed at first that it might be some sort of an excretion or residue from plants or animals, but they ruled that out. They say it doesn't appear to be microbial at all, or it does not appear to act as a seed pod would. They further stated that it seems to have glass-like qualities, that it's very unusual, but the bottom line again, they can't identify it. A few weeks ago, I submitted a sample of this stuff to a physicist, Dr. Harry Fechter. He's a former chairman of the physics department at UNLV in Las Vegas. He's worked at Los Alamos Lab, summa cum laude graduate of Stanford University in physics. He took a look at it under a microscope, examined it, speculated that he thought it looked like a byproduct of some sort of an industrial process that used high heat. However, he would not venture a guess